Joining us now on the impact of this move by Stellantis and the wider implications for the economy in the wake of Trump's trade war is Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown. Mayor Brown, good to have you back on the program. Thank you very much for making the time.
My pleasure.
I have to start on those jobs that are so clearly at risk. Do you have any clarity at this hour on whether those jobs are gone?
Well, we don't have clarity, and it's a punch in the gut, this news. 3,000 workers, highly trained, highly skilled, who have devoted their life to this assembly plant. We're expecting to go back to work in short order. And this pause was set up for the retooling, which was subsidized by the Government of Canada and the province of Ontario. And so the Jeep Compass was meant to go into production, and now that it's going to Illinois, the families are devastated. It's ugly news for our community. There's no way to put lipstick on the pig. This is ugly news for our community. It's going to hurt, and there's numerous associated jobs that are going to be affected by it.
I know that you've been in touch with the company. I assume there has been some communication, rather, with the governments at both the provincial and the federal level. Is anyone providing you with assurances that there's a possibility, for example, those jobs will stay?
No. Stellantis said yesterday that if there's a trade agreement, if tariffs are lifted, that there's a business case for production in Canada. But they said with these tariffs, there's simply not a business case. And so they were not hopeful. They said down the road, we can look at production, but there's too many ifs in that equation to give any comfort to myself or the workers that have lost their jobs. And we're angry. This is a company that in 2009, when they were on their heels in the global economic slowdown, the Government of Canada stepped up and helped them. In 2022, it was Prime Minister Trudeau and Premier Ford that invested in the retooling in Windsor and in Brampton. And given the amount of assistance they've had from the Canadian taxpayers, the fact that they would quit and run so quickly based on Donald Trump's tariff policy is extremely disappointing.
So the Federal Minister of Industry has indicated that she's considering legal action. I don't know the terms of the contract that was signed over the investments that you referenced. You probably have a better idea. Do you think that there is some sort of legal recourse, and is that something that you would support?
I'd absolutely support that. I think we should use all legal tools to hold them accountable for the subsidies they accepted. And whether it's in 2009 or today, they've had a partnership with the Canadian government based on their long-term commitment in Canada. Melanie Joly's chief of staff reached out today. They mentioned they were sending this letter, and I'm encouraged by that. I want the Government of Canada to look at legal options. Frankly, I think Brampton is a test. If we roll over and just let Trump steal another factory from Canada, he will replicate that elsewhere. This needs to be painful for Stellantis. And frankly, it's time for us to punch back, as Premier Ford said. We dropped retaliatory tariffs under the hopes that we could get a deal done with the U.S. That was Canada's collaborative position. It doesn't appear to be working. And my larger worry is that if he's successful in the auto sector in stealing these jobs from Canada, it's not going to stop there. It'll be aluminum, it'll be steel. He has telegraphed this. He's been very blunt and transparent of what his intentions are. This is an attack on the Canadian economy and in any area he believes we compete.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to ask, there's obviously what's happening in Brampton, but there are comments straight from the president last week in the Oval Office, right down to his delegate as far as the trade file goes, and Howard Lutnick, who was extremely blunt with a Toronto audience. I'm sure you've heard all about it, about the fact that they don't want to buy cars in Canada anymore, that maybe they'll buy parts, but Canada should come second to the United States. There is a very live debate happening right now, politically speaking, about what the government should do in response, how far they should retaliate. You referenced Premier Ford, who says he's going to sit down with the Prime Minister tomorrow and urge him to hit back harder as well. When you say hit back harder, what specific changes in Canada's posture would you like to see materialize? How would you like to see the federal government do that?
Well, right now, we're in a trade war with the U.S., one that we don't want. And obviously, I love an agreement that, like we had before, that worked for Canada and the U.S. But, we can't be blind to the reality. We're being hit again and again and again. Every few days, it seems like there's an announcement of tariffs on new sectors in Canada. And I think partly the reason for that is that we haven't pushed back, that we've abandoned those retaliatory tariffs. And so I would say the retaliatory tariffs that were looked at, less than a year ago, need to be on the table again in any area that the U.S. depends on. We've heard many stories from U.S. mayors and U.S. elected officials and industry leaders that they depend on Canada. Well, in those areas that they depend on us, whether it's natural resources, whether it's critical minerals, whether it's commodities, that they depend on this relationship with Canada, just like they've gone after our sectors, we need to put tariffs on those products going to the U.S.
The federal government, has been questioned, and the Prime Minister himself frequently on this basis. And the response, if I understand it correctly, seems to be something along the lines of that would jeopardize what exists right now, that so much of what we do have is covered by CUSMA outside of the sectoral tariffs that are in place, and that, as they mentioned last week, there could be a deal on the table, and we see no evidence of that at this point, but that there could be a deal on the table where steel and aluminum and energy are concerned. The word autos didn't come up. The word forestry didn't come up. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't want a deal at any expense. A deal that abandons the auto sector isn't a deal that I think is good for Canada. And to the 3,000 workers in my community and many more that will come in associated sectors, that would not be comforting. And so I do believe, that a bully doesn't respond to someone that rolls over, that you have to push back. And I think now is the time to leverage those tools that we have to let Donald Trump know that we're not going to take this line down. I just feel that it's been, smiling, grinning, shaking hands, trying to make the best of a bad situation. But it really is putting, lipstick on a pig. It's ugly right now. Canada's under economic attack by this U.S. administration.
All right, Mayor Brown, I'm going to leave it on that note. Appreciate your time this evening very much. Thank you.
Thank you.